One of my challenges, Jason, is it was always hard for me to differentiate between the criticism of the church and the criticism of me.
Hmm.
My well-being and my church's well-being wanted to become one thing.
Yeah.
We all have predictable tendencies, and they're all different for all of us, but those are why we do all of these coping mechanisms. So the extreme coping mechanisms would be burning out, destroying relationships, secret addictions. Those would be the really extreme ones. I've never done those. My coping mechanisms are what elevated me to be a lead pastor. People pleasing, spinning the truth, some of this stuff. So we all have coping mechanisms that get in the way of the gospel.
Well, Steve, thanks for making time to be with me today.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. Good to be with you.
For all those listening and being introduced to you today, give us a little window into your world.
Yeah, I grew up in Western Australia and grew up completely unchurched. Came to faith in a local Church of Christ youth group. I think my testimony very simply would be that home was not a safe space, school wasn't a safe place, and church as a teenager was like the first place my soul could relax. I couldn't say it that way when I was a teen, but as I look back on it, I could be myself. I was accepted. So really, Jesus transformed my life, introduced me to unconditional love. It was profound. And then I wanted to serve God with my life. I sensed a call to ministry. And for a series of complicated reasons, I ended up in America to do my theological study. And then my life was changed when I was a hospital chaplain. So after I got my Bible college degree, I became a hospital and hospice trauma chaplain. And that I still take lessons from that. And that was almost 30 years ago now. Then I went and got an MDiv. I was a crisis interventionist in Las Vegas at a massive church. And then I've been a lead pastor in Colorado for 16 years. And a couple of years ago, I handed over leadership to this wonderful young pastor. And now I'm a congregant at the church I used to. I travel and speak full time on leadership anxiety and on the dynamics that infect all our relationships, including our relationship with God. So it's weird. My formal training is in theology, but through chaplaincy and my informal work, my specialty is the dynamics that infect human and your relationship with God. So that's now my work.
Tell us a bit about the experience of attending the church that you led for that many years.
Yeah, it's really nice. Different people have different proclivities, and I have problems, but I'm not a control freak. That's not one of my problems. So it was not hard for me to hand it over. The young pastor, his name is Zach. He's an incredible human being, incredible leader. This is his first pastorate. He was a Young Life guy, member of our congregation for years. Zach and I have known each other a long time. We did a full nationwide search, and he became our most obvious candidate right there in our backyard. Yeah. So it was a long, slow process over about 18 months of handing him, like me and the elders discerning that I was moving into this new role, preparing to search, and then the search, and then the handover. That was all about 18 months. So the church had about 9 months of that was public. Probably about 9 months of it was behind the scenes, just the elders, and we brought in someone to help us. Then a 9-month public process, and then once Zach became the pastor, I worked for him, which was a great pleasure. I worked for the church for, I think, 18 months, and then my travel schedule just got so intense, I felt like I was neglecting my church job, so I resigned, and I preach a few times a year when Zach wants me to. I'm like a behind-the-scenes cheerleader, and then I play in the band just for fun once in a while.
I love that. Yeah. That's got to be special because, in a congregation, there's some people that, love you so much. They must just get such a kick out of seeing you not preaching, but playing guitar in the back there. Like, that's a special picture. I'm sure for some it's very tender.
Well, and for me, it's a gift too, because, I've been at this church for 20 years and many of us, not everybody has been there that long, but I don't know, I bet there's 100 people or more that have been there for 20 years, and I'm not keen to walk away from those relationships. So it's gone very well. People don't see me as a pastor anymore. I mean, they kind of do at large, but not in any functional leadership way. I have no authority at the church. I have no responsibility. Wonderful. I find myself, we have a number of widows and widowers at our church of all ages. In fact, a defining part of my lead pastoring was loss. Young dads dying tragically. And these were all key leaders. And so just to be able to walk in and sit with a widower maybe, and not, like, I used to walk into church, Jason, with the pressure of greeting and like not just preaching and managing a Sunday, but just who should I be talking to? And I'll be honest, it is an incredible gift to still have that pastoral call without any responsibility. I can sit with whoever I want to sit with. I can pursue, but I don't anymore feel the job description weighing on my shoulders. So that's really nice.
I've never really quite thought about how tricky Sundays are when you're the pastor. You're to be like present to a conversation, to even be present to the sermon, whatever your response. It's very hard. Like your brain is just. I think that's why you come home and you feel like you've ran a marathon or two.
Yeah.
I've been pastoring for 5 years as a lead pastor. I've been in ministry for a while. Sometimes people will ask, what's been the hardest part, or how's it going? And the hardest part is the pain of others. Like you talked about loss being a theme, and I feel like now I understand more than ever why there's probably a self-defense mechanism to shut down parts of your heart, because I don't know that humans are meant to be proximate to this amount of pain and suffering and doubt and confusion, existential pain, physical pain, relational pain, and you just enter in. That's been the hardest part for me, is to go, how do I continue to stay tender, not become hardened, but also to be able to move, to not be completely. How have you, you've been in this space, you mentioned being in chaplaincy before. And so being proximate to deep pain is something you've been trained in and had to confront. I just would love any reflections you have on the pastoral burden of being proximate and call to be proximate to so much pain.
I think you've really hit the nail on one of the key challenges of pastoring. I think if you ask the average human, how many people do you know right now with cancer? They would have a number. It's 1 or 3 people maybe. But you ask the average pastor, and that number is insane. Like we are generally, I guess on one hand, Jason, it's an incredible privilege. Like I always felt like when I got up to preach, I'd look over my congregation and think, wow, I have been privy to 200 secrets. Like I see, and I'm looking at people like, oh, I remember when I was at your house, or when you came in to meet, or you were very vulnerable about them. I was the only one you've ever told. And so I've always felt like what an incredible privilege, but also, yes, I have found it most helpful to remember that I'm a human being, because I'm prone to forget. If I'm not careful, I think I'm a different species called pastor, which is somehow above it all. So, in our congregation, we had 4 young dads die in 5 years, and 3 of them were my dear friends. One was my volunteer worship leader, one was my chair of the elders, and then one was in my small group, and it was annual. And my kids and their kids were friends, and I went in for therapy during that time because I'm not good at grief. I'm what would be called anxiously optimistic. Like my optimism is a great gift, but I have to be happy to be okay, if that makes sense. Like, so pain, sorrow, sadness, grief, I just get pretty uncomfortable. So I'm not good at it. So I've had to learn to be human-sized, and that's helped me a lot. And there's no question that being a chaplain at 24 years of age, it stripped me of all my pretense and my Bible answers and my all of my charm and wit and things that I use to get by, chaplaincy stripped me of all of that. I mean, I'm still witty. It's not that I'm now a dullard or serious, but I was depending on those tools in my pastoral encounters. And chaplaincy taught me how to walk into someone's pain without needing to shrink it, without needing to explain it, fix it, give advice, just to be present. I'll be forever grateful for that because my wiring is not that way. I'm prone to pithy advice and shrinking people's pain and quoting a Bible verse. So, yeah, chaplaincy was a real gift in that.
Maybe we could park there for a little bit. I don't know what is happening in every particular Bible college or seminary, but a lot of the training, it's like a class or two on pastoral care, trauma. For me, I didn't go through a traditional route. I didn't have seminary or Bible college training. And, you know, I the first time I ever went to a bedside to see someone who was dying, there's no training, there's no manual. I remember calling one of my pastor friends, be like, I'm driving to this family. What am I supposed to do? And it's such a funny question because it's like, I think that is the kind of the question I want to ask. What are we supposed to do? What are we going there to do when we enter into, let's use the scene of the hospital bedside. There's the one who's sick and there's the family around them asking massive questions or processing a very potentially painful future. What is the role of the pastor, the chaplain, to enter into that?
The role is to represent the presence of Christ. That's all the role is. It's incarnational ministry. Is I enter the room. I don't bring God with me. God is already in the room. So I'm not bringing God. I'm entering a space where God is sovereign and at work. But anxiety and pressure and trouble and sorrow tend to make us forget God. So my job is to attend to God and attend to the family and, of course, the person dying. That doesn't automatically mean that I'm supposed to introduce the family to God's presence. That may be obnoxious to do that, or it may be helpful. But the way to be present to God and to the family is simply to die to my false needs that get in the way. And I say simply, it's not easy, it's just simple. It's very hard to do. But for example, I don't know about you, Jason, but I have an anxious need to make people feel better. I have an anxious need to do well, do a good job, say the right thing. Well, those false needs all get in the way of me being able to attend to God and attend to the family of the dying person. One of my most poignant experiences as a chaplain was I did pediatrics for 6 months. We would do rotations like a medical resident would do. And I had 6 months on pediatrics and prenatal, preemie babies and everything to do with kids. And this 16-year-old came into the hospital to die. That's why they came. He didn't want to die at home. His parents didn't want him to die at home and have that memory, so they came into the hospital for him to die. Now, he'd been my patient for several months. He had had cancer. I'd spent time with him and the family. And the day I sat with him for 6 hours, and there's nothing to say. There's nothing to do. But it feels wrong for me to sit and not say anything and not do anything because I'm prone to action. I'm a classic type A driven leader. That's kind of my wiring. So you have to learn to mistrust your impulses. All of the things that you've relied on in ministry, it's not that they're wrong. But you just have to be suspicious of them. You have to restrain them. So what I teach people is restrain and reflect. Restrain your impulses long enough to reflect on them with God. So what that looks like is, Lord, I'm feeling this need to do something. Are you calling me to do something, or is that my anxious response? And I'm not going to do anything until I get clear on the answer. So it's almost impossible to do in your first visit. You're so anxious. I mean, you're so concerned you're going to do the wrong thing. And then after your first visit, you discover, visiting someone who's dying isn't walking on a tightrope. Like, there's room for me to try. You know what I mean? You probably had this experience, Jason. Like when you walk in for the first time, you're like, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. And then you come out realizing, okay, this is just another human encounter. I can enter into this space and pay attention to what's going on. But I just had the gift of doing it dozens of times a day for a year. Yeah.
I wonder if we could build a little bit of a list here of the things that we think we're supposed to do, but we're not supposed to do. Like one of the ones that comes to mind is provide answers, or you mentioned ease the pain. But somehow I might say or do something that, I don't know, does anything else come to mind? What are the things that we also just need to remind ourselves that that's not necessarily our job in those moments?
Well, I think we've all seen people, somebody dies and the friends gather around the widow or the widower. And then out comes the sayings, right? Like the cliches. One of the most common phone calls I've gotten as a pastor when someone has died is somebody will call and they say, my best friend's husband just died. What book can I send her? And I very gently say, the last thing your friend needs is homework. Like her husband has died. She now has a second full-time job, which is the legal process of death certificates and bank accounts and all that stupid stuff, plus also grief. And grief is a full-time job. It's like when you are grieving, you're like, I didn't do anything today. Why am I so exhausted? Because you're working a second shift. So what's happening in that friend is she can't control her anxious need to be helpful. So let me give you a book and now I can feel better. So it's the difficulty of restraining what feels to you like you should do. So saying the right thing. Some of us feel a need to defend God. People will say, how could God allow this to happen? And you make the mistake of thinking they're asking you a question instead of just crying out like a psalm. So the goal is simply to see God. I mean, I hope this sounds concrete enough for people. See God and see people. So one very tangible thing I find helpful, Paul describes death as a thief. I love that. I think that's so helpful. When Paul's writing about death, and he says, death, where is your sting? And he's kind of taunting death when Jesus is going to come make all things new. And in my experience, even when your 98-year-old mother dies of old age after a great life, you still feel robbed.
Yeah.
You don't say to yourself, well, she actually had a good run. Like, I should be thrilled. No, you feel robbed. And so I find as a chaplain, naming that for people. So I'm just trying to name reality rather than explain God. It's like, so I might even say, Paul describes death as a thief, and I found in my life that's a really helpful, like something precious was taken from me. And the people will be like, yes, that's what it is. Or I might say, I wouldn't say it as someone's dying, but maybe when we're planning a funeral, I might say, hey, I just want you to know grief feels like a second full-time job. If you're exhausted, that's normal because your emotions and your body are working another job. And I don't know if it's like this for you, but my experience with grief is it's kind of like a tornado. It just shows up on its own agenda. You're looking at the weather. You're like, what's the weather today? There's no but suddenly the tornado shows up. And then you're saying, well, how long are you going to stay, tornado? And tornado says, none of your business. I stay as long as I stay, and it does its damage, but it's also going to go. It's going to come, it's going to go. And that cycle of the weather coming and going through your heart is going to happen sometimes 20 times a day. Sometimes after 6 months, you're like, oh, I'm done. And then year 3, worst tornado. So I'm trying to name reality for people just to help them feel normal and seen, and trying to show them God is not as prone to taking away our problems as he is entering into them, and as is appropriate, trying to show people where God is in their pain or attending to people as they notice God in their pain.
Mm.
Unfortunately, Jason, there's no way to teach it in a quick hour. It's what you have to do is say, okay, Jason, go do it. And then, all right, let's have a beer and talk about how it went.
Yeah.
And go do it again. That's the only way I know how to do it.
I actually found that really helpful. I think you described this in the first chapter or something to that effect of your book, Managing Leadership Anxiety. And what I took away from it was this almost like a pattern of enter into the space and then process the experience with peers and then enter into the space again. And it's almost like a pedagogy or
that's right,
a formative loop. And I think that there's something there that I think that the busyness of the pastoral vocation or an inability to know how to process it or lack of conviction to do it, like, I guess what I'd love to hear is like, what does it look like for us to be a growing pastor in this way? Like maybe we didn't come in with all the training we need, or maybe, well, for sure, there's no textbook that solves all this. So you're on the job, you're doing it. Like one of the things that's tough about being a pastor is you're learning to be a pastor in front of people.
Yes.
And for those listening who got into it young, I think that we have a lot of stuff to sort out about all that we learned in front of a lot of people. But this process of going, okay, so I'm not an expert at whatever it might be, bedside, pastoral conversation, a conversation with a staff member or a volunteer, elders meeting. Could you speak to a loop that we could probably all implement into our life that is like entering in and then a reflection pattern that could cause us to be a growing person?
Yeah. And you've hit the nail on the head that the chaplaincy training is a formal training called action, reflection, action. So just the way you loop that pedagogy, it's intentionally, the plan is throw you in the deep end, debrief it every day. So every morning for 90 minutes, we all debriefed before we started that day's shift, every day for 90 minutes. So it's action, go do it. Reflection, talk about how it went, get feedback from your peers and supervisors. Action, go do it again every day. That's how we all became effective chaplains. You know, you mentioned that there's very little taught in seminary, of course, because you have to go do it. You can't read about it. I'm always defensive. You know, some pastors have a little cynicism. Well, they didn't teach that in seminary. I'm like, of course they didn't teach it. Like
some things you can't.
Yeah. So what we did at our church, and we still do this to this day, we have a cohort for 2 hours every other week. And it's optional. You don't have to join it. And this is now what I do online with people all over the world, is I have an online, we've now made a digital version of this thing. And we just put you in cohorts for 9 months to 2 years. You can do 9 months and then you can sign up and do another 9. And it's what I did in chaplaincy. It's a chance to reflect on your leadership, your decisions. You do family of origin work to get clear on what you're holding and what has a hold of you. But you also present cases to each other. And so maybe it's that first hospital visit. Maybe it's an elder meeting where one elder hanged up and you didn't know what to do. And maybe it's a sermon that went really badly, or maybe you're prone in your preaching to speak off the cuff. And so you said something you don't believe. Whatever it is. But
that's the worst. I can't believe you named that, by the way. Because
what's that?
That what you just named, because of just my journey as a young minister, has been the source of so much stuff that's locking me up.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I read one of your emails recently where you're like, who's over your shoulder?
Yeah.
One of the voices over my shoulder is like, don't say something untrue again, off the cuff, you know? I just appreciate that you shared that. That really is one of those pieces that until I started processing that with other pastors, that I realized I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And I can hear them look back at me and remind me what I know to be true, but my body doesn't know that no one died.
Yeah.
And I wasn't fired, you know, and it's going to be okay. And people didn't get led down heretical pathways, you know, or whatever.
Oh gosh. I mean, my problem is I am at my best when I'm somewhat off the cuff, not fully off the cuff. I have a fully prepared sermon, but I very rarely look at it. By the time I'm preaching, it's basically memorized. But, you know, some pastors, they're very cautious. I'm the opposite. I'm best when I'm a little bit under the gun. and when something spontaneous happens. And therefore, the shadow side of that is I say things I don't mean, or I say things I really shouldn't say. One time, our church was really small. I saw that one of our elders was not at the service, and it's because he was coming to the second service. And when I'm not well, I get smart alecky. It's not good. And I said to the congregation, he's probably at home sobering up. Like, what? And as it came out of my mouth, I'm like, oh no, don't do that. And out it came.
Yeah.
And this elder doesn't have a drinking problem. It was just a silly joke. Well, of course that meant sitting down with him and apologizing to him and his wife. Of course it did. And he knew, he came over, he's very gracious, and he's like, I know that you say things up. I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm working on it. But I can't eliminate it, because then it would eliminate what's most powerful about my preaching, which is this kind of live in the moment thing. And so what these cohorts do is they give you a safe space to process anything you want to process about your proclivities and shadow side and where you're running into yourself. We do that at our church. You can come for 5 days and do it with me and my team here in Colorado. We do a 5-day intensive, or you can join my online community and do it online. But what we encourage every organization to do is, however long you spend in staff meetings on the mission and vision of your church, spend that same amount of time in a cohort working on yourselves. We recommend a 1-for-1. So in our church, 2 hours every other week is our staff meeting. Every other Tuesday, the first and third Tuesday of the month is our staff meeting. That's when people are reporting, updating, working on things. And then the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, cohorts. And the children's minister can bring a case of, I don't know what to do about Saturday night cancellations, and my spouse is frustrated, whatever they want to bring. And our cohort is a safe space. You're in the same cohort for a year. You sure get to know each other when you're putting your family of origin up on the wall, and you're holding each other's vulnerabilities, but you're also helping each other grow. Really, really powerful. So that's most of my work, is trying to convince organizations to do that. And most of the pushback is they're like, well, we're too busy.
Yeah.
Where would we find the time? I'm like, well, all I can tell you is your management load and your anxiety goes way down. So you might say you're too busy, but then why are you calling? Like, oftentimes I'll get an emergency call, Jason, like, hey, I need time to figure this out. I'm like, look, you wouldn't have to call me if you did these cohorts. If you set up a proactive anxiety relief valve, because most pastors burn out because of their patterns and they keep running into themselves. And so, that's what
Say
I would
more
say.
about that line. They keep running into themselves. I was at a pastor's gathering this last week, and as everyone was introducing themselves, it was like, family, church, just quick intro, 90 seconds, and then one pain point. And, it's always surprising what comes to your head. I was like number 40, and I had a lot of time to think, what's my pain point? And the thing that kept coming to mind is the pain point is myself. Like the thing I'm bumping into is me. And I'm like, I didn't know how to say it, because it's like, it's not this in this particular season. It's not some like gross sin or some big, it's just like, I keep coming up to myself. And that's the biggest challenge I have. It's the biggest ceiling, all those things. So tell me more what you meant when, we keep running into ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, my tendency to speak off the cuff in the sermon is both my superpower and my kryptonite. And I can't eliminate it, but I can manage it more than I can be more filtered, be more wise. But the best chance of doing that is to go to a cohort where I'm loved and accepted and say, guys, I need to explore this tendency I have. When you see it in me, would you show me, please? And try to get to what's driving it, my tendency, like one of my challenges, Jason, is it was always hard for me to differentiate between the criticism of the church and the criticism of me. My well-being and my church's well-being wanted to become one thing.
Yeah.
And so I was what is called, like, you're probably familiar with codependency. Well, most lead pastors are codependent with our church. It's really weird. So that's where I keep running into myself. I'm an overfunctioner. I'm a conflict avoider. We all have predictable tendencies, and they're all different for all of us. But those are why we burn out. Those are why we get divorced. Those are why we do all of these, what we would call coping mechanisms. So the extreme coping mechanisms would be burning out, destroying relationships, secret addictions. Those would be the really extreme ones. I've never done those. My coping mechanisms are what elevated me to be a lead pastor. People pleasing, spinning the truth, manipulating some of this stuff. So we all have coping mechanisms that get in the way of the gospel. And so that's what I'm talking about. Now in chaplaincy, they pulled it out of me. I didn't realize that the job involved 90 minutes of group therapy every morning. And so I went into chaplaincy. You think I was 24. I'm a white male, brand new Bible college graduate. That's one of the most dangerous humans in the world. A white male theology degree. I come out of college thinking I'm unstoppable. Thank God for me. I'm teasing myself, but not far off.
Yeah.
And I take that hyper confidence, which I thought was a gift from God, but it turns out to be a coping mechanism because of my deep insecurity. In my late teenagehood and early 20s, my deep insecurity just swung wildly into confidence and arrogance, dominating the room, being quick-witted, being funny, quick with the Bible. Well, I take all that into chaplaincy and discover that all of that is a massive liability to connecting people into pain. So then I'm sitting in these morning cohorts, and my supervisors and my peers can see all of it because it's so obvious, all of my coping mechanisms, and they're very aggressively pointing it out. And so because, I don't know if this makes sense, but because I was going into chaplaincy with so much pretension and pretense, I was hiding behind pretense, and they were able to go right around my pretense and see me. That became massively threatening to me. Like the first time, if you're ever in one of these cohorts and the first time somebody sees something about you that you don't see about yourself, and once they see it and say it, it's all you can ever see of that. Like suddenly, oh man, they're right. Like we call it blind spot knowledge. They have found your blind spot and now they've shown it to you and now you see it. Or maybe you have just come to realize your proclivity, maybe to preach off the cuff. Maybe you've been doing it for 7 years and you've just come to discover it, but they see it in 5 minutes. Like, this is really annoying. That was very threatening to me. So my first 12 weeks of the cohort, I was very combative. I'd go home to my wife and grumble about these people, and they'd mind their own business because they were rummaging around in my coping mechanisms, and I didn't know I had any. I just thought about Jesus and him crucified all the time. Like I was just so unaware of myself. So when we do our cohorts, we don't reach in and pull it out of you. They did that in chaplaincy, I think, because the stakes were so high. They're sending these young green people into rooms of grief. They kind of have to turbocharge our awareness. We made the decision. We thought to ourselves, look, if you've signed up to be a children's ministry person in our church, you didn't really sign up for us to rummage around in your coping mechanisms. You signed up to staff the rooms and curriculum. So we thought, well, we'll make our cohorts optional rather than mandatory. That way you don't have to join them. And then when you join a cohort, we will never reach in and grab something. We'll always invite you to rummage around and pull something out you want to explore. And that's how I run Capable Life today. If you come to my house for a cohort, you can spend 5 days with us. And if you want to hide and pretend for those 5 days, my coaches will never confront you about it. Like even when we see it, we won't say it. Because we've decided the best chance of you being well is to relax your pretense over 5 days so that you can maybe for the first time in your life pull something up to explore. So I said a lot there, but that's...
I appreciate all your sharing.
Yeah, that's our process.
I'd love to chat a little bit about observing anxiety around you, within you, in systems and structures. This is one of the things I've just so enjoyed listening to your podcast. And it's almost like it became a language set for something I was beginning to perceive more and more, this idea that there's this like currency of anxiety being exchanged. And when I'm talking to that person, I'm like, all of a sudden the stakes are really high and I can feel disoriented. Like, what am I reacting off of here? And like on a good day, I can go, oh, there is an exchange happening here. And this might not even be like, he's probably been in a meeting earlier this week with a council, and there's a system or a pattern of how anxiety governs the space. And now he's charged with that. And then I feel like I have like a decision before me. Will I let that contagion grab hold of me? Or will I observe it and then try to relate to it in a way that's both kind, but also like, I can't afford, it's not good for you or for me to just enter into that slipstream. And that just, I feel like I'm in like in Canada, we got like the learner's license and the new driver symbol. I feel like I'm somewhere between L and N, in this, but it is transforming, like being able to drive, to be able to perceive and then pay attention to. Can you describe a little bit about that and how that matters for pastors who are leading teams or leading congregations?
Yeah. I mean, I think you actually described it beautifully. I think the L plate metaphor, what you modeled for us right now is noticing. So I can't improve on what you just fleshed out, but I can summarize it. If you can notice anxiety, you're less likely to catch it and spread it. So you modeled for us noticing it in that guy and then noticing yourself at the same time. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to be in the meeting and observe it at the same time. So I picture myself like floating above me, looking down on my interaction while also being in it. And anyone can do that. So anyone can go into there. The best thing to do, Jason, is pick the next anxious situation. It's most commonly a board meeting, an annual meeting, a meeting like this where there's stakes involved. Perfect. Now just go into that meeting noticing the patterns. And most humans have an invisible bucket of anxiety that is almost always full or overflowing at any given time. And they're just looking for relief. And so that's why it's contagious, is we're just trying to dump our anxiety, and we are prone to dumping it on each other. And if you're an overfunctioner like I am, and most pastors are, we are very happy to catch it and carry it in the name of Jesus. But that's not what God's called us to do. So I put up with way too much crap from just a few congregants, not many, who would mistreat me so badly. And I'd say to myself, well, that's part of the job, kind of be a punching bag. And then I realized that's like they've got more anxiety than they can carry. They're dumping it on me. But that's not good for them to treat me this way either. Like, it's certainly not good for me to be treated badly. But it's not good for their soul to mistreat the pastor. Well, that helped me put the anxiety back where it belongs and tell them what it's like to be on the other end of them. And so once you learn to notice where it's spreading, you can start to redistribute it. Yeah. And that's where it gets really powerful. And really the move you have to make there, like this one guy you talked about, there may not be anything to do other than notice it and not catch it and work at staying connected, even if he's dumping it on you. That may be all you need to do. But if you're in a more ongoing relationship with someone, you might over time put the anxiety back where it belongs when you realize, not like he didn't just treat me this way one time. Every time we meet, he's dumping his anxiety. Like, it's a pattern. And I'm part of the problem because I'm allowing it. Like, no wonder he treats me badly. I let him. I worked with a children's minister once in one of these cohorts, and we said, what problem do you want to address? And she said, I want to address just how many volunteers cancel on a Saturday night and leave us stranded on a Sunday morning. I said, oh, yeah, great. Well, tell me what happens. Well, they call Saturday night and maybe they forgot they have an event, or maybe they're now going out of town because they're doing. She's like, it's either way, they're generating the anxiety, I'm carrying it, right? I now have to staff the room, and my spouse is upset that I'm now working Saturday night. And I said, well, when they call you and they tell you that they can't make it, what is your attempted solution to the problem? This is some of the more advanced work we get to, is when you can figure out your attempted solutions. And she said, oh, I know exactly what my attempted solution is. I tell them that's no problem. Because she's such a people pleaser, she can't manage the anxiety of saying to them, oh man, we're really going to miss you. Like, she doesn't have to tell them off. She doesn't have to say, how could you do this to me?
Or make them feel guilty or something.
No. All she has to do is put the anxiety back where it belongs. They're dumping it. She's carrying it. They're saying, my family really want a mountain getaway. We're getting away. She doesn't have to say, how could you do this to us? Now I have to make 50 phone calls. And you may not know this as a volunteer, but people avoid my phone calls now because they know the church is calling on a Saturday night. Like, she doesn't have to do any of that. All she has to say, but what she's doing is saying, oh, no problem. No problem. Hope you have a wonderful time in the mountains. Well, no wonder they're doing it. They're not carrying the anxiety. She is carrying it. She's so-called letting them off the hook, right? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
All she has to do is manage her people-pleasing and say to them, I hope you have a wonderful time. I want you to know we are really going to miss you. Man, we're really going to miss you. When you are gone from children's, the kids notice, we notice. We'll be down a person. I'll be working to replace you. And that's hard. But I just want you to know, man, when you are with us on a Sunday, it really makes a difference. Thank you so much for volunteering. We'll look forward to the next time you're with us. Well, that's different than, oh, no worries, no problem. That's communicating, volunteer, don't volunteer. It makes no difference to us, which isn't true. And then, if that volunteer is always canceling on a Saturday night, now you have the courage to say, I've noticed this pattern that when you say yes to something, you then say no later, and we're not sure what to do about that. What's your take on that, right? Like, now all of this kind of language is not making them pay. It's not vindictive. It's simply putting the anxiety back where it belongs. That changes systems when you operate that way.
Maybe I'll bring up another case study that's coming to mind. And I know this is a particular kind of church. I think where volunteer-driven Sundays, whether it's kids ministry, the sound booth at the back where production happens. I think one of the tools that I'll just speak for my peers, like younger leaders, have learned that has a measure of effectiveness is downward pressure. And I don't want to misuse the language set, but like using stress, anxiety to cause people to care in a short-term amount. So it's like, if you come in on a Sunday and things are not where you hoped or wanted them to be, and there's all sort of background voices, I want this to be great, da-da-da-da-da. And I feel like there's this sort of default mode in some, I see it in myself, where in order for me to ensure that they care, I need to show that how the stakes are high through some measure of intensity or whatever it might be. And then you can kind of see that, like, all of a sudden people get to work. We got to solve this. We got to get the pieces together. But like, what it does is cause people to shut down. They don't think well. And then it creates an unhealthy environment. And then that becomes a tool that they begin to use with other volunteers, and it cascades down. How do we enter into a space and say, I do care. I see that this matters. Or maybe even it's, hey, it's okay if Reg is slower. It's okay if we don't have slides. It's okay. But I see that you care. I don't want to diminish that this matters to you, but I want to invite us to change frequencies. Like, how do we actually change the frequency on a Sunday morning?
It's a great question. I've seen this dynamic you're talking about, and I do find it problematic. I think, yes, we are wanting our volunteers to carry a level of responsibility so that they know that if they aren't there or if they don't get that work done, it affects the service. Like, I do believe that that's really valuable. But we are always meeting, like, just in the way that anxiety is contagious, so is connected presence. And so as a leader, being a deeply connected presence, and what that might look like is a meeting on a Sunday morning, it would be like, we all do this every week, and we can forget that for many people, They almost didn't come today. They weren't sure if they wanted to come to church. They're not a follower of Jesus. This is why. So I'm always giving some version of this is why we do what we do. This is the difference your work has made to that effort. But I'm absolutely the most relaxed person in the room, for sure. My theory of event planning is by the time the event comes, I should have nothing to do. If I'm a good event planner, as a lead pastor particularly, on the day of the event, I shouldn't have a job. My job should be walking around, thanking people, relieving anxiety, optimism, vision. But oftentimes we find ourselves we're so responsible that we take on too many tasks. Now we're not present to our people, and they catch our anxiety. And
yeah. I'm so thankful for this time with you. I just can't commend the work of Capable Life, the podcast Being Human, and your work more highly. I think that this will really serve and help some people. Before we end our time, I want to hear a bit about your most recent work called Expectation Gap. I'd love to hear, I really resonated with this core premise of there's often a gap between what we expect of God, the promises we've prayed and learned, and then our day-to-day felt experience, and just how disorienting that is. And as I was thinking about that, it's so disorienting for us, the pastor, but then we're constantly also pastoring people through that gap. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about maybe just the origin of this conversation in your own life. Like, where did this come out of? And what are you hoping how are you hoping this would serve and help people as they follow Jesus?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've been a relational dynamic specialist since chaplaincy. So that's 1996. It's a long time. And 20 years into that, 2016, I had this light bulb moment because as a pastor, I kept relating to God more as employee than child. That was my fundamental problem as a pastor. My identity and my vocation kept getting confused. And I was struggling to experience the God I believe in. I was struggling to experience the love of God that I proclaim to others on a regular basis. And 2016, I kind of got fed up. Most of my growth is from this running into myself over and over again. And I thought, I'm becoming a well-meaning hypocrite. I'm becoming functionally a deist, which is not biblical. I'm struggling to experience a God that's involved and loving in my life. So the wake-up call for me, Jason, was when I realized, wait a minute, I'm a relational dynamics specialist. What if the same dynamics that infect our human relationships infect our relationship with God? So I brought the science of reactivity, stuck patterns, and assumptions into my faith relationship, and that's the heart of the book. So the three gaps we tackle is I believe God loves me and I don't feel it. I believe God is with me and I don't see it. And I thought I'd be further along by now. And it's meant for pastors and congregants. So I have a whole sermon series. If people want to email me, I can send them a 6-week sermon series. The book has study guides for midweek. It's really designed to be a church-wide campaign because this kind of work, you can't just listen to a sermon. You have to meet in midweek groups and discuss it and take time. But that's the heart of the book, is to help people believe in their body what they believe in their head. So my head believes in freedom in Christ and my body is not free, that kind of stuff. So trying to align whole body belief so I can relax into God's presence is the goal.
Last question. You get to work with a lot of pastors. You see a lot of the challenges. A lot of them are perennial, not new. What are you seeing that's giving you the most hope right now? As the pastoral landscape changes from generation to generation, as the world around the church changes, there's new problems. What are you seeing that you're going, this is encouraging me. This gives me hope for the future of the church?
I thought that my kids are the next generation. I've got a millennial and 2 Gen Zs. Do you say Z or Z in Canada?
We see Z.
Excellent. I'm
Thanks
so glad
for doing
to hear
that. That's the Commonwealth connection, right?
Right. I get so much nonsense from my people in America for saying Zed. It's what the Queen demanded of us. Anyway.
Thanks for contextualizing for our Canadian audience. That's
well,
very
it's
kind of you.
my heart language too. So, my 3 children are millennial and Gen Z. And I thought that they would be infected by all the church scandals, all of these big name pastors that turns out like these colossal ministries, right? That like Ravi Zacharias, these kinds of level, these awful. My kids haven't even heard of those people. They don't know who Bill Hybels is, and they love the look. Like my boys are both moved away out of state for college, and the first thing they did was find a local church and roll up their sleeves and serve it. And that's not because they're PKs, preachers' kids. I see that in that generation. My youngest son is part of a college-age worship ministry, and it's grown from like 200 to 1,200 in a year and a half. It's just exploding. I was just at Asbury University with Zach Meerkrebs. Zach's the guy whose sermon triggered the Asbury outpouring. And
I love that story so much. It's so great.
Oh, well, the reason, like I host a podcast, of course, and the best thing about a podcast is who you get to meet.
Yeah.
So I happened to be in Kentucky for some consulting. I reached out to Zach. We got together and he's like, hey, you want to come back tonight? There's a monthly worship gathering. And I was like, oh, Zach, I'd love to, but I'm consulting this church staff tonight. He says, well, no, we don't start till 10 p.m. It goes from 10 till midnight, full-length sermon. And I show up, and that little Asbury, it's packed, like 700 students and probably 50 faculty all come out for the monthly 10 till midnight worship and sermon. And so that's what I'm most excited about. I think this next generation, I think there's so much. I love what I'm seeing and their hunger for Jesus and the passion for the purity of the church and the kingdom. I think it's incredible.
Well, I'm so grateful for your time today. I'm thankful for your voice. I'm thankful for how you have allowed your own journey with God and with self to vulnerably share what you're learning and how your journey through it's been a great gift to me and even in this conversation. So thank you so much. It's a real gift.
Yeah, Jason. Yeah, thanks. It's a wonderful conversation. Thanks for having me on.